Carrie, happy Wealth Wednesday. I'm so excited to have you here today. It's been such a pleasure to work together and grow from what was, an initial introduction through Eve's community and membership all the way now to really pushing the boundaries on what the future of credit unions and cooperation could look like in this space. So it's so great to have you here today, and I can't wait to highlight your story from traditional finance all the way now to this world of more digital emergent technologies. So to kick us off, I'd love you to share where you're calling in from and what you're up to these days.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for setting this up. Thrilled to be kind of talking today. I am calling in from just outside Boston, Massachusetts. So I'm originally from the West Coast, but have been on the East Coast for about 6 years now.
Awesome. And you've had just such a brilliant career. You started, I want to even go back into your profile, list all these things because it's so impressive, but started at Wells Fargo in more traditional space, all the way to Eastern Bank and the labs there. So really innovating in the fintech space, and then fully diving into the world of startups with Numerated, which was really advanced and supported by the PPP loan process and things that emerged there. And then really diving in fully into the startup world of Web3 and now advising some different startups and entities on that as well. So it's been such a cool journey. I can't wait to dive into each one of those things. My first question always is how did you start, right? So you have this deep now experience in finance, but what was your first ever investment? What got you started?
Yeah, so I have to give a lot of the credit to my dad. He grew up in Pennsylvania and had a teacher's college in his town. So he became a math teacher. But I think in another life, he would be a fantastic investment broker on Wall Street because he has phenomenal investment savvy, and that is where I learned it from a very young age. So he always showed me what he was doing, and on his teacher salary, always gave my sister and I everything we needed growing up. I got through college with very little student loans and got to watch and see the power of investing kind of that way. And he still does. I still call him for investment advice. He is now 80, and I took him to Consensus last year to the crypto conference, and we learned crypto together because that's just what I'm used to. So yeah, I got started very early.
What did he think of Consensus? I just want to detour on that quickly because that's so fascinating.
Yeah, so I just loved watching. We would go into a session and acronyms would be throwing around left and right over our heads. And then we would get out and he would want to talk about it. He'd say, all right, so, the kid in the 3D glasses that bought the thing that's called an NFT. So tell me more about that. And it was fun to watch it through his eyes, but also learn together. So yeah, no, it was a wild experience.
Wow, that's so fascinating. I can't even imagine where we're going to be when we're 80. So a consciousness will be uploaded somewhere and we'll be where actually are we even? That's fascinating. And so how did you get into your space? How did you get into banking first and foremost? And just share a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, so banking I very much fell into. And I've told this story a million times. I was at the career center at my college and needed more interviews and got down alphabetically to the W's and saw Wells Fargo and signed up for Wells Fargo to just fill out my interview docket, basically. But since then, I really follow, and every job I've had since, I've followed the people. So in that interview led to another interview, really wonderful people at Wells Fargo. I had a 15-year career there in commercial lending in all sorts of different areas, and loved working with the people. I was very loyal to the teams that I worked with. I grew up through their training program. So I did their financial analyst training program and credit training program, and really started out, and this has continued, of supporting in some way small businesses. So at that time, I was giving them funding through commercial lending to watch in the neighborhood where I lived, kind of how that could affect a business and how they could hire people and how they could grow and, add facilities and that type of thing. So that's really where I got started.
So interesting. And now you've really become like sort of this emergent expert in lending, especially with Numerated. Can you share a little bit about that role you play in the wealth space and why it's important, especially around credit? Like maybe there's a misassociation with credit as a bad thing. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on like how credit and lending can also be a big part of wealth creation.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to access. And that is one of the things we really tried to do at Numerated. So, Numerated was born out of an incubator at Eastern Bank. And I was with a handful of other amazing innovators. And we decided to roll out a company that focused on digital lending platforms. So, giving banks the opportunity to get funding in the hands of small businesses very quickly. Because if you're a small business, your highest value is time, and you don't have time to come into a branch and spend hours filling out an application and then 6 weeks to potentially get declined. And you just don't have that type of time. And so we really enabled banks to be able to speed up the process for those small businesses. And you're exactly right. You can use credit for all sorts of different things. And a lot of times it was critical for small businesses to rely on credit. PPP is a great example. So through the pandemic, there was a stimulus program to give loans to help with continuation of payroll. And so we saw that opportunity and wanted to make sure that small businesses had that as a tool in their tool belt, because yes, wealth building has all different aspects to it, but you can absolutely use credit as well. The other thing that I was really involved in at Numerated was helping banks understand, when you are looking at the profile of a business, there's a very specific way we're trained as bankers to look at it. And you have to, and there normally involves a lot of time, a lot of write-up, looking at all these different areas of the credit. But if there's ways that you could identify trends and create rules around who could get qualified for credit, you could actually speed up the process. And so we did that a lot in Numerated. I was very involved in working with banks on their credit policy to say, hey, like, you are always approving in this area. Let's just set up a rule and get them approved right away. And then for the hairier ones that you do want to give credit to, focus your time on there. So it was really almost time management for the bankers to help them divvy up their time and, again, speed up the process, get credit out to more businesses to just help on the whole.
I love that. We can even dive a little bit more into like the things you've learned about the world of credit as well. But I'd be curious what you think has been the most exciting thing you've learned, especially in the digital credit space now, maybe even as you start to think about Web3, that you would want others to know.
I think by far, one of the most exciting things for me is, so I'm of an age that I sort of missed. I was still in college when the internet really boomed, and I didn't get to be a part of that. But I have been very much a part of watching corporations. And when I did business, I would fly around the country and meet people in person. Then I would do that plus conference calls over the phone, and then see this drastic increase to video conferencing and Zoom calls, and how the pandemic has really just revolutionized that. And so what's exciting is all of these Web3 technologies that are now potentially going to be our next leap, and knowing and trying to empower, especially women, to be at the forefront and helping make those decisions to kind of shape how that looks. I would love to, in the future, just like Zoom call, just like we're talking is kind of the norm now, I would love to do a call in the metaverse with an avatar. I just don't think that's so far of a leap. I do yoga over a laptop. That's a norm for me now. Like, why couldn't we do that, in a space, in a more virtual space that adds more inclusivity and really just would be a whole nother dynamic to engage. So that kind of stuff I'm very interested in and want to help push the technology forward. It'll be interesting to see which industries it hits. It might take a while. Banking's pretty old school, so it might take a while to hit different industries, but I definitely want to keep kind of pushing in areas to see where it fits.
Is there a person or a company that's really inspiring you right now, whether it's in Web3 or just like emergent technologies around credit and lending and getting resources into the hands of people who need it to grow, that you're noticing and like keeping an eye on?
Yeah, I don't know if I have a particular company to like call out, but I would say one of the linchpins of trying to move forward lending is when you're going to lend money to somebody, just credit 101 is you have to know kind of who you're talking to. And so that was, back in the day, you'd drive to the warehouse and you'd walk around and you'd kick the inventory boxes and you'd shake hands with the owner and look them in the eye and like kind of know who they are. So any of the, and there's a ton of companies out there, but anyone that's trying to tackle this, and this is a banking term, the know your customer, KYC, which it talks about, but anything in that space, because I think that is the linchpin of digital, when you need to figure out who you're talking to and the identities. And I don't think it's a lost cause. Like, just because you're not physically across the table from somebody doesn't mean you can get enough pieces of information to feel confident that you're lending to the right person. I truly feel like there are ways to set this up around identity where you can feel good and you can lend money and speed up the process. So any of that area, I think, is just something to look out for, because we need it everywhere. It's not just lending money. We need it in a lot of places to be able to trust who you're talking to.
We recently did an amazing credit union round table where we brought together some like industry leaders and innovators in the space around credit, around community credit, community banking, and even startups. Were there any, people or companies that really stood out in that process of exploring that landscape, or like they're really exploring something interesting?
Oh, we had a lot of great people attend that roundtable. It was amazing. And even as I was helping put it together, I got to learn a lot of in the credit union space that I wasn't aware of before. Just to call out a couple. So Circle Technologies is a great company. They are trying to bridge the gap between fintech companies and credit unions, because when fintech, and I know because I founded one, we would focus on banks and kind of larger dollar deals, and we weren't focused as much on credit unions. And so what Circle is trying to do is really show the spotlight on credit unions and how there is a need, and kind of put those two together. So Jim Ryan attended, and it was phenomenal to be able to kind of, and actually after the call, we actually made some connections between some fintechs and some banks and that type of thing. That's one that stands out, I guess, would be my answer.
You're also a fund, so actually like moving capital to progress those technologies that are focused on credit union. Super interesting. For people who may not even be familiar, can you describe like what is a credit union? What is community credit?
Yeah, so credit unions have been around for a really long time, and they normally would. It really did start with a community. So there was a community need, whether it was a company that had employees that had a need, or it was a group of people that had a financing, or they kind of needed to come together and share resources. Any of those different types of groups would form a credit union. And then as they became more, there were rules set, and kind of people had created protocols around credit unions, and that's how they started to form in different states and even outside the United States. The concept kind of came from all over. And today, what they really like to focus on is anyone in their community and really serving those needs. And so, yes, they need to stay in business and make money, but that's not their initial focus. It's really around, how can we, so let's say on the credit side, how can we lend credit to a certain group? I got really deep into some research around domestic violence survivors. And there are credit unions that are piloting programs where they can give domestic violence survivors a micro loan to try to get them on their feet, because a lot of times that is the blocker to kind of get them out of the situation. And knowing that, this isn't a population where you're probably 100% going to get paid back, but that's okay. How do you shore up the risks, and how do you make it worthwhile so that you're still serving a need, but still managing your balance sheet and your business that way. And so they're always looking for that balance and that edge to kind of create these programs around.
That's such a great description, like this idea of the common bond, something that's bringing people together. And there's all kinds. It can be for new immigrants. It can be for, associations or worker groups or faith groups, geography based. There's all sorts of reasons and why people gather. And I think we've been really interested in how people are starting to gather digitally and online, maybe in less of those typical fashions, and like what that could mean for credit and the future of supporting some of those needs for specific use cases and personas. What advice would you give to somebody getting started? Maybe somebody coming from a more traditional background like banking and trying to start to explore this new emerging technology, but maybe feeling a little overwhelmed, or it feels like way too futuristic, or potentially like, there's a lot of bad PR now around the space. How do you recommend somebody like navigate that and think about whether it's still something worthwhile to learn and understand?
Absolutely. I talk with a lot of different of my network, and we're always talking about this type of thing and sharing advice. And absolutely, my number one piece is, if you are thinking about stepping into something, so whether this is even at your current location or you're going to get involved in a technology you don't know, get involved a little bit before you think you're ready. So many women I talk to, very accomplished, and they think they need just a little bit more experience, or they need just like one more piece before they go and take on that next role, or before they step into this new industry. And the Web3 industry, there are no experts. It has not been around long enough for there to be 20-year experts in something. There are no experts. So you don't need to feel like, oh, I don't know enough about it. We're all learning together. There's no excuse. There's never a bad time. No CEO founder I know has every piece needed to be a CEO founder. They always have some strengths, some weaknesses, and then they hire a team to kind of shore up around them. It's key to be self-aware. You do need to kind of know, and Alana, you're a perfect example, watching you lead Eve Wealth, like you're extremely self-aware, knowing what your strengths are, and it's hard to find, you don't have many weaknesses, but you're very aware. And I think that that's really important. And even jumping into things a little bit before you're ready, I think is just a good motto in general, even in your personal life. I am 44 years old. I'm also 7 months pregnant. And there's never, just like they say, there's never a perfect time to have a child, to have a big life change. At least when you have a kid, just 9 months goes by and then they are here, and you just have to step into it and just make it happen. And so the same goes with any opportunity. It's just getting into it and then just figuring it out. We're all very capable people that have figured out things before, especially motherhood. It's been around for thousands and thousands of years. We've all figured it out. So I just say, like, that is like my biggest piece that I try to share with everyone.
I love that. It's such a great analogy too around motherhood, and like, there isn't always like a best time, and there's unexpected challenges and all those things. And if you're, thinking about taking the leap, like, take that step. That's really a great analogy. I love that so much. As you've been talking to people in the industry, how do you feel somebody can navigate through the noise? So say you have that inkling and you're like, I do want to take this leap, but there's all this commotion right now and all this dust like that has yet to settle. What do you feel like, especially for someone in a more traditional industry, where even like bringing that topic up in their place of work right now might just be taboo topic or just like off bounds now, although it was like potentially super important in the hype cycle. What would you say to those people? Maybe advice on like how to get started and navigate that, or even think about the return on investment of like learning something that at this point has just been, feeling like riddled with complexity.
Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, I know so many people that if you say crypto, it's a big eye roll, metaverse, like all these terms, Web3, you'll get laughed out of the room. People just don't, they just don't believe it right now. So in my experience, there is research out there. So if you're interested, you should look into it yourself and form your own opinion. You can trust your gut around that there's something there, and you can listen to all these other experts and all these other people, and even people at your corporation who are high up, but they're just forming their own opinions too, based off their research. So, I'll take blockchain, for example. When I left Numerated and took kind of a break, I had time to read all the white papers on blockchain and go deep and like really kind of research everything. And I think it's a technology that's here to stay. And so, but you have to form that opinion. And so I think one of the first steps is for you to get confident about it. And then if you want to continue to research it and focus on it, you should. And it'll be a great story later. There's people who trust their instincts and try things that other people laugh at. A lot of times have a lot of success because they're the first ones that see it, and you don't need to be shot down by other people. So it's something I've seen kind of over and over, and even when you see like there's credit cycles. So over the decades, then there'll be situations where you don't want to lend in certain industries, but then that changes. And so I think the tide will turn and I think things will change. But you're right, Alana, there's so much noise. There's a lot of kind of disbelief and eye rolling and that type of thing. And so it's just determining whether you want to kind of research it and what you believe in, what you figured out.
Such a great way to end this discussion of just trusting yourself, and that point that a lot of the times the people at the forefront, do face challenges by definition of being different or seeing something different, and how to find your community and also just trust your own intuition about what's right for you and where your curiosity is guiding you, and not let all the noise get in the way of what is low to zero risk, which is just education, learning, curiosity, spending time. Like time is our most valuable thing. But if you have a genuine curiosity, it could be worth the investment. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Sure.
I so appreciate you being here today and everything that you're doing in the credit space and how you're moving even more into advising and supporting others on this journey of building fintechs, and even in the Web3 space, and especially female founders. How can we keep in touch with your journey and everything that you're building and creating in the world?
Sure. So you can find me. My company is Ascension Digital Partners. It's all one word.com. So that would be, there's a place where you can reach out to me and we can connect there. I'm also just Carrie at ascensiondigitalpartners.com. So you're welcome to reach out that way. And yeah, I'm focusing on kind of two areas. And I'm doing a closer approach to small businesses, startups, and nonprofits around female women empowerment, or just areas that have a huge need, like alternative health kind of providers, and how we can help fill those gaps. So if you have a business that needs that type of help, that would be the best time to reach out. So yes, always.
Fantastic. Well, we'll definitely be following along, and so appreciate your guidance and the work you're doing, even with Eve, and progressing this agenda around financial well-being and the feminine finance economy. So thank you so much, Carrie. I can't wait to see what comes next, and appreciate you being on this today.
Thank you, Alana, very much.